The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back talking vintage sports in the zone. I'm Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I'm going to introduce a panel of mavens to die for, but don't. George Case III. How are you, George?
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody.
Hal Blumkin.
Hello there, everybody.
And David Hubler.
Hello, hello.
Hal Bock. How
Good
are
evening,
you, sir? All right. You guys going to talk about books that you've read as kids, sports books and periodicals that you read, magazines, sporting news, and what have you, and how it fueled your passion for sports, baseball in particular. Start with you, George Case. Take it away, guys. Have a great show.
All right. Well, thank you, Ralph and Alan. And David and Hal. It's always a pleasure being with you guys. And with this topic is of personal interest to me. And my interest in the game was really fueled, by my dad, because I read the books like Sporting News, periodicals like Sporting News and Sports Digest and Baseball Digest and Reach Guides and Spalding Guides as a kid, because often my dad was in those books or magazines. So, I had an interest in my father's career, obviously, but for me, it was very personal to pick up a magazine or a newspaper and see my father's picture or a story about him, and that's how really fueled my interest as a youngster, and continued on through my teenage years, adult years, and even today. I have quite an extensive baseball memorabilia collection of my father's that I was very proud to have and share that with my family and my children, grandchildren. And so the baseball periodicals were, a key part of my growing up years. And I was very fortunate to know personally, because he was my dad, the subject of some articles and photographs in those various publications. So that's my little take on this. And Alan, Hal, David, I'm certainly interested in hearing what you guys have to say.
Okay, I'll start. As I mentioned several times, my parents had no interest in this, and I got into it from the cards. 1951, 1952, and of course I don't have any of them, real ones left, but that's a whole other story. And I started reading Baseball Magazine. I couldn't believe that there was a magazine like that came out every month or every 2 months in the off season, and then they went out of business. So I started getting things like the Dell Baseball Annuals, the Sport Magazine, which came out every month, and I love the color pictures in Sport Magazine, the full page color pictures of the athletes, and then I got some of the yearbooks. Well, I started getting into this when I was 13, 14 years old. The Yankees yearbook every year, and as I got older, I accumulated a lot of them. But the big discovery for me was in 1957 when somebody gave me a copy of the Sporting News, which I had never heard of. And I read this. I said, "Damn it! This whole paper is on baseball." They printed the AAA box scores, everything, and they give you all these little paragraphs on all the absurd things going on. And I said, this is every week for a quarter. Oh my God! And then it got to the point where I renewed it every year that they published a guide. So I started collecting the guides. When I was 12, my parents got me for my birthday a subscription to Sports Illustrated, and I still get it to this day. But I thought in the early days of that magazine it was much too esoteric. And I didn't take it seriously because in 1956 they named an Olympic runner named Bobby Morrow Sportsman of the Year over Mickey Mantle. And that was...
You know what, Alan, I remember those issues of Sports Illustrated, and the first issue that I recall, because I think it was the first issue that Sports Illustrated published, had Eddie Matthews on the cover.
Yeah, I have the reprint of that. The original one, is going for a lot of money today. But that's where was my first introduction. And that
really
they had
Sports Illustrated.
Images of Topps cards, and that was an insert into that issue. And then they did a couple more in the second issue. But they would do stuff like swimming and diving and all sorts of stuff that I really had no interest in then, and I still have no interest in. There's very little I could get out of it for the first several years. And then I think it was 57, they started publishing their baseball issue every April. And that's when I started to really start to enjoy it a little bit. But I used
I must interject here. Sports Illustrated was the hallmark publication for many, many years in our industry, in sports. You could depend on it every week in your mailbox to deliver really good journalism, good writing, and important writing. But however, they've fallen on hard times. They cut half their staff about a month ago, and they announced recently that they're going now from a weekly to a monthly. So I despair for the future of Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, right now it's a bi-weekly. It's every 2 weeks.
Well, it's going to be a monthly, they say. It's going to go...
Yeah, I know.
That's...
by the time you get that, it's old news already. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very high wire act to keep it current, But that's their problem, not mine. When I was a kid, my dad used to come home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon from his job as a mail carrier, and I used to come home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon from my job as a student at school. And so we would arrive at home just about the same time, and he would have a newspaper with him, his daily news, New York Daily News, and he would have read it already, but he would give it to me, and I would start reading that paper from back to front. To this day, many, many years later, I read newspapers from the back to the front because
so do I.
The front section is.
Yeah, of course. That's not back to front to us.
When I taught journalism, I would hold up the paper and I would hold up the back page and I would say, "This is man's accomplishments," and then I'd hold up the front page and say, "This is man's failures." So that's why I read the paper back to front. And that was the main thing that I read. Sure, I read Sport Magazine every month, and sure, I read other periodicals. But for me, the education in sports came from the daily newspaper. And I despair because every day you hear of daily papers shutting down in the age of the Internet, which that's another subject for another day. But
I'm sorry, Hal. Go ahead.
I do remember as a kid getting a gift on my birthday one year of a softcover book called Big Time Baseball, and it was a treasure trove of profiles and stories and stuff, and I was fascinated by it, and I loved that book, and I read it from front to back. Had it in my home for many, many years. I don't know where it disappeared to over the years, but I did have it for a long time. And I later learned that book was edited by a man named Ben Olin. Ben Olin, I met Ben Olin because he worked at the Associated Press. And sadly, Ben Olin died about 2 weeks ago at the age of 96.
Wow.
And
wow.
I had Ben Olin to thank for my early introduction to baseball because of that book, Big Time Baseball. So
I'll let
you have it. Go ahead.
Well, I was sort of treading on your footsteps because my background was very, very similar to yours. I had the book. I loved that book, Big Time Baseball. I learned all about Mickey Owen dropping the third strike, and it had pictures of Klazuski and all these. It was a wonderful book. My father would come home. He worked on Wall Street, so it was an hour's drive, a ride on the train on the IRT, and he would buy the New York Daily News at the newsstand by the station in the morning, and then on the way home he'd buy the World Telegraph at the Sun. And so when he came home, he'd give both of those to me. And you know how fond I was of Willard Mullen's cartoons from your book.
Me too.
And and having written the article about it, that's why I said I had to get that book. I had to do the article because Willard Mullen to me was the Da Vinci or the Michelangelo of sports cartoonists, and that was one of the first things I looked at in the paper. The Daily News I got pretty much for the scores and some of the background reporting, but the afternoon paper had a bit more depth to it. I remember the World Telegram and Sun, and as for magazines, like Alan said, Sport magazine had the best photography of all. In fact, a close friend of mine, his cousin was, his name was Newman, I forget his first name, who actually did a lot of the photography for Sport magazine. And they were incredible. You know, this is an era before color television. So what they show, you know, the pictures were just spectacular and awe-inspiring, right on the you know, football end zone and great shots from baseball. So I always got Sport magazine. And interestingly enough, years later, and Hal, you would certainly appreciate this, the first time I covered the NYU basketball team, I guess it was 1961. And I think I've told this story about how we went up to Utica, New York, and we were snowed in, and it was just a mess, and it was going to be televised. And so the first team that showed up, it was a doubleheader. The first team that showed up with NYU would play simply to get the game on TV. They were supposed to play, I think, Syracuse. Instead, Holy Cross showed up first. Anyway, and so, of course, I wrote about that for Square Journal. But a few years later, Sport magazine had an article about how television was beginning to control sports. Very prescient article, by the way. And one of the examples was that game. How NYU agreed to play whichever team showed up first because it was going to be on television.
Oh, wow.
Sure.
Does anybody ever get the first Talkin Thompson encyclopedia?
The which encyclopedia?
The first one, the official baseball encyclopedia by Hy Talkin and S.C. Thompson.
No.
Oh, I had that when I was... that was a present for my 9th or 10th birthday, I forget which. And it had a lot of stuff in there. It had a register. But unfortunately, the only numbers they had for batters was games played and batting average for the year. Nothing else. And you really couldn't do anything with it. The pitchers were another story. They had the won-loss records every year. They never told anything. So a friend of mine and I spent a lot of time totaling up lifetime win-loss records for pitchers. But the rest of it, it was the one who introduced me to the book that introduced me to the 19th century. It had all the rule changes, and it had the standings from every year from 1871 to 1951 and 1952. And you look at especially the 19th century standings, you see all these teams that only were around for a few years, and it was for what it was very educational. But you really didn't get any statistics out of an encyclopedia until the first Macmillan.
Don't forget, Alan, that was the first one.
Yeah.
So you would expect that it would be almost a bare bones effort.
Yeah, it was.
You know, there have been so many advances in that respect.
Now you can't get a printed one. The last printed one I have was from Neff Cohn after 2007. Everything's on Baseball Reference, so they probably think they can't sell any of these anymore.
Yeah, whatever you want to know is on the computer now. Baseball.
Yeah.
Reference.
Oh yeah.
But I must add something. I started to say before, I was not much of a book reader. I was a periodicals, newspapers. I loved newspapers. I always did. And my dad would bring home the Daily News each day. And in the afternoon, long about 5 o'clock, I would go down to the neighborhood candy store and buy the World Telegram and Sun, which was an afternoon paper.
Right.
The Daily News, of course, was a morning paper. And so I'd buy the World Telegram and Sun. And years later, when I got to NYU, I hooked up with a guy named Hy Kersner, who was the sports information director. And we became friendly. And he said, "Hey, would you like to work at the World Telegram?" And I dropped, my jaw dropped. And I said, yeah, I would like to work there. He said, "Well, they're looking for somebody on the school board desk. Why don't you call up Phil Pepe, and he'll talk to you." Phil Pepe was the new school board.
Wow.
Right, I remember that, yep.
I called him up, and he said, "Come on down, I'll talk to you." And I marched down there. I was in the Air Force ROTC in those days, and I marched down there in my uniform. I marched into the World Telegram and Sun and got the job. $5 a day, 5 days a week, $25 a week, to compile scores and write a little 3-paragraph story each day, and it would be in the paper. And now this was the paper that I had gone to the candy store to buy each day when I was a youngster, when I was a kid. And it was such a thrill for me and for my parents to have my stuff in a New York Metropolitan Daily newspaper at the age of 18, 19, however old I was. So, that's my memory of growing up in the journalism business at that age and being so excited about the opportunity to write a story and see it in print the next day. As far as magazines go, I was also a sport magazine. Dick Schaap was the editor in those days, and they did a great job, I thought. And most of my friends would cut out those pictures, put them up on the wall in their rooms, because they were terrific photography, as David mentioned.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Another thing I'd like to bring up, another thing that sparked my interest was those Putnam team histories. I used to take those all out of the library, when they came in, and I read them from cover to cover, and they reprinted them, all of them, a bunch of years ago, and I have all the reprints. But basically, the earlier ones stopped in the mid-40s. Like the Cardinals, the last one was 1944. When they did the Giants, the last year was 1951, which, of course, was a huge year for them. But those books were very, very detailed. They were very well written. And I got those days, of course, there were only 16 teams. And so I was able to get a lot of information out of all of those books.
What was the name of that again? Because I didn't.
Published by Putnam.
Uh-huh.
Fred Lieb did a number of them. Lee Allen did a number of them, and they varied in quality because of the writers that did them. And they started with Connie Mack of the A's in 1943, and they finished up, I think, with the Browns to Orioles in 1954.
Alan, you mentioned that book, and I happen to have one. It's called The Washington Senators, and it was written and edited by, of all people, Shirley Povich.
Yeah,
and
well, sure, that makes sense.
It's extremely valuable. I also have another one which is even more valuable from a sports writer by the name of Morris Beale, and he wrote a history of the Washington Senators, but his history ended before Shirley Povich. So I think his history ended like around 38, 39, something like that. Povich went right through the 50s. But it's a book that I've always enjoyed, and I'm sort of like with Hal. I wasn't really into books, but I did like those baseball books because in particular, it dealt with a subject that I was very familiar with, and that was the Washington Senators.
And there were also things like Who's Who in the Major Leagues that went out of business after 1952, and the Dell baseball, those medium-sized Dell baseball annuals that went out after 1950. I think after 52 also, and basically replaced by magazines.
Right.
And magazines were tougher to keep because they took up more space. But Dell used to come
there
out.
Was Alan, maybe you know, or Hal or David. There was a book that I remember, not a book, but a magazine, and it was called Who's Who in the Major Leagues.
Oh yeah, by Harold Carmichael.
Carmichael, right?
Yeah, I have
right.
I have the last 6 of those.
Okay. That's the one I remember picking up because they would have, team histories and pictures and biographical data about the players, but also some team histories and so forth. And I always enjoyed those, but I know Harold Carmichael was the editor. I'm not sure the length of that publication, whether it was published into the 60s, 70s. I really don't know.
The last issue of that was 1952, covering the 1951 season.
Okay.
I have the last 6 from going back to 1946.
Right.
Okay. And the other one was, Who's Who in Baseball, the little red book, Who's Who in Baseball.
Right.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which had all the averages and all the stuff in there.
Yes.
And I would buy 2 copies. They were like 50 cents a piece. One I'd put away, and the other one I would use.
Now, Who's Who in Baseball was a different publication than Who's Who in the Major League.
Oh yeah. Who's Who was a little red book that started coming out around 1916.
Right.
The last issue was 2016. They went out of business after 2016.
Okay.
But they used to come out every year, and they used to give not only the career records of players, but they would have all the movements. And then they made a very unfortunate decision where they started to list all players' appearances on the disabled list from A to B, and some of these guys, they had tons of them, and it took up a lot of space. And
you have all these publications in your house?
Were they published?
The Who's Who's I have from Who's Who in Baseball I have from 1944. I started buying that in 1957. I went to a card show, an early card show in 1976 or something like that. I was able to pick up the back issues that I wanted for like $2 or $3 a piece.
You have any furniture in your house?
What were they? Published? Were they published once a year?
People come here and
for baseball season.
Yeah, people come here and they're amazed at the number of books I have and the number of all this stuff. It's a fire hazard. I have well over 2,000 books here. Not only
you give out library cards to your friends,
right. Basically, it's not only baseball, and football, and basketball, but it's a lot of movies and a lot on histories.
Yeah, can people move around?
What?
You have enough room for all of this stuff?
Not really.
That's what I said. Can you move around?
Yeah, I can move around, but I stopped a couple of months ago. I stopped getting books from Amazon because I found out that I used to have a tremendous reading capacity. I don't have that anymore. When I was in college, I could finish a 500-page book in a night. I'm 76, and my concentration doesn't last that long anymore.
I think we're all that way,
yeah.
Alan. It's just not you. Believe me, I know that's the way I am as well. But I started to ask, were those baseball publications, Who's Who, and were they published once a year, right prior
once
to
a year,
baseball season?
Once a year, yeah.
Okay, and then they were updated for the next.
Yeah. The Who's Who was the next
year.
Yeah, they'd have 57 would have everything through 56, and 58 would have everything through 57. And they really expanded that because they were competing with the Sporting News Register, which was a lot more informative as far as the player's biography. And but in those days, that was $5.
I was surprised. I had lunch with some friends yesterday, and I was surprised to learn that Baseball Digest is still in business, and the editor is a guy named Rick Cerrone, who used to be the Yankees public relations director.
Yes, right. And the name was familiar.
Yeah, I remember that name, sir. Yeah.
Not the
I have
catcher,
a friend named Tom Zacco that has every Baseball Digest, going back to 1942.
That's
well, he has
scary
tons
stuff.
and tons. I have nothing compared to what he has.
What?
Yeah. He buys every baseball book that comes out, even whether it's good or bad. Yeah. And he has all. It's not so much the books as the publications. He has all these publications that lasted a year or two and they went out of business because nobody was reading them. He has tons of college media guides. He gets the media guides from each team every year. Since a lot of them don't sell them anymore, they put them on on the internet, and he downloads them. I don't really have that capacity or that passion anymore for this stuff.
What is the circumstance now with the Sporting News?
I don't even know if they publish anymore. When they started going to that magazine format and they brought in basketball and hockey, which was bad enough. When they went into oil racing, I said, that's it.
So they don't publish anymore?
I don't know if they publish anything anymore. They don't publish any of the guides. What succeeded the baseball guide.
Yeah, the baseball dope book. Remember the dope book?
Yeah, I have a few of those. What succeeded the baseball guide is the Baseball America Almanac.
Right.
The National Football League used to make their guides available to the public. They don't anymore. So I checked some of these new ones out on eBay, and they want $90. And the NBA guides stopped with the Sporting News when they discontinued. They discontinued the guide, the register, and everything in 2007.
The reason for that is the internet. The reason is everything on your computer.
You're absolutely right.
And it can be updated almost instantly.
Yeah, you look at a current player, and you look at him the day after a game, and his record for the season is updated already.
Sure, that's what the announcers use.
Yeah.
So they don't have it all memorized.
No, of course, when Howard Cosell would do baseball, whatever game he was doing, I get the team's media guide, from the other room, and he'd be reading right out of the media guide.
Sure. Well, and I'm sure all the other guys did it too. Mel Allen. I mean, they didn't have any instant way to.
No, they would be updated by runners from the reporters that run the stuff up to the announcers booth. But with the advent of the internet and everything being available like that,
sure,
there's no reason for. They decide that there's no reason for printed journal printed encyclopedias every year.
I retired in 2004 from the AP, and in those days, and God knows what it's like today. I'm afraid to even think, but in those days, in the early 2000s and late 1990s, you went to the ballpark. They'd give you baseball. They would give you notes, pregame notes, printed up, and they would tell you in those notes. They'd say, for example, David Wright hits 259 on sunny Wednesday afternoons, but on gloomy Wednesday afternoons, he hits 247. Wait a minute. Why do I need this kind of information? But they had it, and they gave it to you. And it's all because of the computer. It's all in there. So, that kind of esoteric information, which I would never use in a story, it was there, always available. And God knows what kind of information they give you now. I haven't been in a press box in quite some time.
Yeah, but
so
you
I
know
can't
how
imagine what they're doing now.
You do hear it. If you watch baseball games, you will hear such, trivia. And what's his name? The announcer I really can't stand. He's the master of it. He's always giving out these little points that you got on the press notes. And he makes himself sound like he knows all this stuff, intrinsically. But what's his name? I
think you're talking about Jack Buck.
No, not Jack Buck.
That's the local Washington announcer?
No, national. He's on ESPN, and he's on whatever.
Tom Produce?
No, I can't think of his name. He went to Syracuse. I remember that. That's what I remember. He's a Syracuse grad. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But
you know what, David? You bring up another subject, and they're not part of what we're talking about, but that's what's happened in baseball announcing. I mean, so many guys, the great announcers, the Vin Scullys and the Red Barbers and the Mel Allens and those people, I mean, they would paint what I call word pictures.
Sure.
And they would give you a flavor of what was going on, not necessarily what was going on in the field, but what was happening in the stands or what was happening in baseball in general. Where the guys today, when we've talked about analytical, I mean, all you get are these stats and all these crazy things going on, and they talk and talk and talk and talk, and a lot of times people will turn the volume down and just watch the game and not listen to this incessant chatter all the time.
Well,
Bob Costas, that's who it is.
Yeah, Bob Costas. Okay.
There was an experiment some years ago on NBC on a football game where they had no commentary. You just saw the game. And it didn't go anywhere. I mean, it was a one-game experiment, and they never did it again. But it was an interesting change of pace from the chatter that you ordinarily would get. And I don't know, did it work? I don't know.
I was watching
what's going on.
I was watching a pretty good college basketball.
On the field at 1st and 10, 2nd and 5, whatever it was. So you could follow the flow of the game, but there was nobody there talking to you. There was no commentary. It was one game.
Didn't they do that with a Major League Baseball game?
No, not as far as I know.
Well, you can't say definitely, but it's possible.
One of the things MLB did 2 years ago, the Pirates were playing a game out in an afternoon game out in San Francisco, so I put the game on MLB, and instead of having the regular announcers, they had Brian Kenny and 3 other talking heads, with the war and the analytics and all that stuff, talking through, and I turned it off after 2 innings. I couldn't deal with that anymore.
Yeah, they don't tell you anything about the game.
No,
they talk about anything but the game. It's awful. It is. It's awful.
Well, Kenny is the drum major of analytics, isn't he?
He's made a career out of war.
Well,
and they have him at the Hall of Fame inductions results every year. When they announce the Hall of Fame,
you know what I noticed about those statistics now? I guess they have to, but they cite the source of the statistics. Instead of just saying war, his war was blah 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 blah, and then in parentheses the analytic company that provided that information. Interesting. It wasn't like that before. I guess they're getting tough.
Baseball is bought into it. I mean, every team now has an analytics department.
Yes, it does.
The Mets just hired a pitching coach who I think pitched for them for about an hour and a half back in the 70s, and he's supposed to be an analytics expert, and he's now their pitching coach. So, and every team has an analytics department. the Yankees are very dependent on analytics, but they've lost me in that respect. I'd rather go with hits, runs, and errors.
And you can tell whether a guy can play or not by watching.
Exactly.
Yes,
as
Yogi said, you can observe a lot by watching.
He was right.
Yeah, I know.
He was right.
Well, I went to a lecture at Nats Park at the time my book was coming out because they had George Will there, and we talked about baseball in the book. But the point was that one of the people who also spoke was one of the Senate Nationals analytics guys, and he told us all about this special box that hangs off the mezzanine right behind home plate, and everything that goes on in the game is recorded by these boxes that every major league team has, and this information is flowing back and forth. It's almost like a stock market equivalent. You know, data is moving from here to there. Everything that happens at Nats Park is being relayed to Yankee Stadium, to whatever, Candlestick Park, or wherever the Giants play now, and that's where all these analytical statistics are collated.
Yeah, one thing that drove me completely crazy last year, and both ESPN and MLB Network bought into it, when Albert Pujols was going for his 2,000th RBI, and they list the all-time leaders for RBIs, and Babe Ruth isn't there. And they say, well, this didn't become an official statistic till 1920. Well, they started keeping them in 1907, keeping the number in 1907. And people with the retro sheets and all that, you were able to determine it back to, sometime in the 19th century. So what they were trying to tell me, that Babe Ruth, in his tenure with the Red Sox, hit 49 home runs and drove in 0 runs. And when I heard that, I went absolutely ballistic.
That's funny.
And they were buying into this crap. I mean, when they start to talk historical, almost every announcer out there now is guilty of it. They have no idea what they're talking about half the time.
I think you're right. I absolutely do. I agree. Somebody took away their computer. The one guy, it's interesting when we talk about the reliance on all these stats by these announcers. The one thing I remember going back, and I was never a big Ronald Reagan fan, although I did like some of his movies. But when I did. I mean, Hellcats of the Navy with Nancy, great movie.
Very nice.
A classic. That's a classic. Yeah.
Yeah, underrated film. But the point was that I remember he did an interview about his days. It was WGN, I think, where he did all the recreations of the games that were coming across a ticket tape.
Cub games. Yeah.
And he was saying that things sometimes, the ticker tape would break down, and he's on the air, and he had to improvise and ad-lib all these stories about what was going on the field, but it wasn't really going on the field, and he just had to keep talking about the game, even though he didn't know what in the world was going on.
A lot of foul balls. We had here. I don't know if you guys remember it, Hal or David. In the first year or two, the Giants were in San Francisco. They had a guy named Wes Kiter.
That's right, in New York.
Yep. So broken bat. He break a ruler on the desk. That's a broken bat hit. He put a piece of paper into a fan. To supposedly create the winds in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, he was terrific, and he had great voice too.
Yeah, he did that. I think for 2 years. The 2 years that they were in Shield Stadium,
And I think it ended when the Mets came about. They didn't need it anymore. But he also had a sports show on radio.
Yeah. Of course, the recreations were 3 games, 3 hours after the game was over. But in those days, it was very hard to get out-of-town scores.
Yeah, but when Reagan did it, it was coming a live feed on the ticker tape wire. So he had to improvise.
Yeah, they had 50 foul balls in a row. Just to,
and broken bats. You're right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No streaking across the outfield.
In those days, they used to make fans throw the foul balls back.
Only
in
up
those
to
days, yeah.
Only up to a point. I got a
that
book.
During World War II?
No, they did in World War II.
This
ball back?
I can tell you. Do you have the book The Baseball? It's a book by Zach Hampel, and it goes into all stunts, scandals, and secrets beneath the stitches. Very alliterative.
Oh, and I have that one, yeah.
But he talks about there was a guy. In fact, there was a guy in like the 1920s in the Polo Grounds who refused to give the ball back, and that, according to him and other legends, that was the start of allowing fans to keep the baseball. Because after all, they used one ball for the whole game.
Yeah, back in the dead ball days, yeah, you're right, yeah.
Yeah, so you couldn't you couldn't let the fans hold the ball. But anyway, if you can pick that up, it's called The Baseball.
Okay, yeah. There's a story a friend of mine told. A bunch of years ago, he was at Fulton County Stadium in Atlanta, and there was a foul ball hit, like the rolling back of him, and some guy tumbled over the seats. A guy who was dressed in this expensive suit and tie. He tumbled over the seats, bleeding all over the place. So they took him to wherever they have that, the infirmary, and my friend had to go there for a cut finger. So my friend says, you ruined the $500 suit, and the guy said, yeah, but at least I got the ball.
Well, you see that, Alan, and I've seen it, and maybe all you guys have, where they, a foul ball or a home run ball or something is hit into the stands, and a guy's holding a baby, he drops the baby to catch the ball. I mean, just crazy stuff.
Oh, I know.
There's one I think that happens in Arizona where the guy was holding a baby in one hand and a beer in the other, and the ball went right into the cup of beer.
They probably then put a sign up on the scoreboard, great catch.
Yeah. I know
in
Baltimore, anybody did that, made a good catch of a baseball in stands, Rex Barney would, sign him up.
Send that man a contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One time I was in the press box at Shea Stadium, and it was the ninth inning of a game, and I was writing my story, and I had my head down. You try to write the story and watch the game at the same time, but it's a little difficult. So I had my head down, and I was typing, and a ball hit me right below the eye, a foul ball.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
Came zipping back and just grazed my cheek right below my eye. And that got my attention, I'll tell you.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Let me give you this a little anecdote here from the ball. Way back in 1915, a first-class stamp cost 2 cents. A gallon of gas went for $0.25, and a game-used baseball fetched $3. At least that was the going rate at the Polo Grounds when a Yankees fan named Gary Clark snagged one in the left field bleachers, got arrested for refusing to return it, and had to pay a $3 fine. That was a lot of money back then, but we're not talking about any old baseball. It was a ninth-inning home run hit by Yankees shortstop Roger Peckinpah against the Boston Red Sox. Considering what the ball would sell for today, it was totally worth it.
Some might just pay over $1 million for the bat that Babe Ruth used.
Yep, that's right.
I just all the papers, all over the papers.
Yeah. I came yesterday. I was sort of thumbing through some of the stuff on the internet on my cell phone, and a picture of the Mickey Mantle Rookie Year card that I have, not the Topps one, the Bowman card.
Yeah.
Popped up and it said, "Cards are worth a fortune." So this is one of those paid advertisement things that just clogged the internet now. And anyway, I sort of went through it, and because it's never the one you see first. It's always like the 15th or 16th. So anyway, they said the cars are worth about $500,000 in good condition.
Anything with mantle is worth a lot of money.
I know, so I got to see what.
Yeah.
Mine had, the back of mine is in perfect condition, but the front has 4 little corners where I use Scotch tape to put it into my album.
Oh God, yeah.
So and there are ways of removing that with a sort of some kind of fluid, but I've never done it.
Yeah, they developed something to remove the gum stains from the back card and the pack when you bought them.
Yeah, well, this is. But I did speak to a guy who said he knew how to do it, but he wanted a lot of money at the time just to remove the Scotch tape residue from the corners.
Now, how sick that became was the Yankees of the late '90s had a relief pitcher named Jeff Nelson, and he wanted to get some elbow chips removed. In an off season, he wanted to put them on eBay, and they said no.
All right.
Oh man.
Well, I'm going to look into it. I'm going to let you. If it's really worth a lot of money, I'll
David, if you decide to sell it, remember your friends.
Yes,
right.
I was just going to say, I'll become a sponsor of Comfortably Zoned Radio.
Yeah, I have all those cards. Unfortunately, they're reprints.
Oh no, this is the original. Yeah, this is
the originals. Forget it.
I've got a number of Yankee originals, all of which were pasted into my book in the corners. Eddie Lopad. Remember a lot of them were not really photographs.
No, they're drawings.
Yes.
The early ones were drawings, yeah.
Alan would remember, I figured. They were like drawings, and there was an outline around them. And And a lot of the Bowman cards were like that.
Yeah, 1953 tops, they're all paintings. In the 1953 top set, they were all paintings. There was a guy named Jerry Dvorak that did most of them.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
I've read a couple of articles on him. I got a magazine every couple of weeks called Sports Collectors Digest. And they run stuff like that, yeah. But anything with Mantle, even if it's a magazine cover, anything with him, it drives the price up. He's still, after being dead for 24 years, he's still the king of the memorabilia.
I have a picture of myself with Mantle. Would that do anything?
It should be worth something. Is it autographed?
No.
Oh.
Just he's smiling at me, and I'm smiling at him.
Yeah. Anything with Mantle, you can put it up on eBay and see what you can get, what people will pay for it. You set up some high prices and see if you get any offers.
I've got my picture with DiMaggio.
Yeah, Mantle is worth more than DiMaggio. Williams.
And it's interesting too how much more Mantle is worth than Willie Mays, his contemporary.
Yeah. And in that market, the hitters are worth much more than pitchers.
Yep.
Well, why Mantle is not around anymore. Willie
I know that.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was always like that. Even when Mantle was alive, his card was worth more, a good deal more. Because I've been following it for a while, having this card since I was 10 years old. So goes back a while. 51, yeah, it would have been 10 years old. So yeah. But
the thing is that the Mantle, the 51 Bowman Mantle, the 52 Topps Mantles, were both in the high numbers of those particular sets, so it make them a lot scarcer.
Yeah, but what I learned from that readout on the story was that the Bowman card is considered the official Mantle rookie year card. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's Bays was in that set also as a rookie. So, but Mantle was what happened with the 52 Topps is that they came out so late they couldn't sell them. So they had a whole row of them in the Topps warehouse. And they made the decision at some point that they needed the room for the current stuff, and they dumped a whole bunch of them into the Gowanus Canal.
They're probably still there.
Yeah, that's why the mantle was the first card in that high number set, and that's why that and Jackie Robinson was there, Campanella was there, Eddie Matthews was there, Reese was there. There's a few Hall of Famers there, and those cards.
So you're saying it's all at the bottom of the Gowanus Canal?
They're probably still there.
This was probably there 40 years ago.
I got to look into a diving suit.
Yeah, because the water's not very clear and it doesn't move very much.
Now it's also not very clean.
Well, no, we know that. You have to dry all these cards out. Okay, I think we've sort of we can end on a good note.
Okay.
Then we're not on next week, right? Is that right? We're not on.
That's Christmas Eve.
No, this is the last show of the year, I think.
Yeah, right. It is. Yeah. Yes.
Christmas year and New Year's Eve.
Next 2 weeks. So I just want to wish all you guys happy holidays, and we'll talk to each other back in. Going forward into 2020.
Yeah.
Yep.
Same here, guys.
Okay.
Happy and healthy holiday and New Year.
Okay. Same to you guys. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
The proceeding has been a comfortably zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.